Hi everyone, Nadine Wellwood, and I'm here today for coffee with Zuzana Janosova Den Boer. And Zuzana, some time ago, had written a wonderful article, which was actually published by Spencer Fernando on his site, and we wanted to get together a little sooner, and I think actually, though, it was a blessing that we didn't, because I think this is more relevant today than it was even when you wrote it. And the article is titled, "I Survived Communism. Are you ready for your turn?" So this is an important warning for Canada. And I'm going to just read a few little snippets from this, Zuzana, and then what I'd like to do is break this down a little bit and talk about your personal experiences and why you felt it was so necessary to send this letter out to Canadians. So the article was written about 18 months ago. I think you said you wrote this?
No, I started to write this article in 2017, but I finished in 2018. It took me 18 months to finish this article.
So it took you some time to get through this, and it's well documented, well written, lots of reference material in here. You're a walking wealth of knowledge when it comes to this. So you lived under communist rule in Czechoslovakia.
Correct, yes.
And you moved to Canada in 1997.
Yes.
So you saw Czechoslovakia probably in its worst times, but then you did get, there was a little window there after communist rule had been defeated.
Correct.
Okay. And you felt obligated to write this article. Let's talk about why you felt obligated. What inspired you, scared you? What was the emotion that sparked the article?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this lovely coffee with Nadine. This is a very special time for me. And what I wanted to say, when I moved to Canada in 1997, July 10, for many different reasons, I was telling myself at the time that I don't want to hear anymore about politics and socialism. And I was sure that if I will move to Canada, I won't need that. And that was a case until May 2015, when we had provincial election and NDP won. So that was a big awakening for me, because I was listening to their speeches, and what I realized that they are using words which are communist in communist Czechoslovakia they used. So I got completely terrified. They used specific words which I was familiar with, and I started to have a discussion with my husband, who is born, raised Canadian, actually Calgarian even, which is very special.
Rare breed.
Exactly. And, his first reaction was like, no, they are not communists, this is Democratic Party. And I told him, I don't care how they call themselves. They use words, they use tactics, which I am familiar with from communist Czechoslovakia. So we had lots of discussions, and once I explained him indoctrination and propaganda, he was really horrified, and he asked me to write this article. So it took me, as I said, 18 months, because number one, I had to go back. I had to go back to my childhood when I lived under communist rule, and many times this was hard. It was really, really hard when I started to recall, okay, what was happening in school, what was happening in different meetings when I was in high school, even elementary school, university, what was engaged, what kind of discussions we had, who said what. And also, when I was working, my first job after I finished university was in a communist company, let's put it this way, or a company which was under communist rule. So that was one thing. Another one, I was doing lots of research, lots of reading, and I put many different puzzles, many different aspects, but I couldn't put them together. And I at one point, I was thinking that I can't finish this article. I was ready, like, drop it. And then I said, how I can live with myself when I know what I know and do not finish. And then something happened. September 2018. I received email from my friend from Slovakia with attached article. Article was in Slovak language. And 2 words in this article, for some reason, they stand up for me. They've been written in Slovak language, and I translated those 2 words. And those 2 words in English meant useful idiot. So
Were they talking about Justin Trudeau at the time, or
no? Yeah, it was just in sentence. Again, I can hear those useful idiots. So I put those 2 words in Google, and immediately I found a video with Yuri Bezmenov, who was KGB agent, and he was also defector, and he did wonderful interview in 70s. And basically, during this 10 or 12 minutes interview with him, he explained KGB method for subversion of society. So all of a sudden, all those puzzle pieces which I had, they clicked within 1 day. But I couldn't put basically together 18 months. So during September 2018, I finalized, then English is my second language, and me and English grammar, we are not friends, And
I don't think English grammar is friends with too many people, to be honest.
So my husband is very, very gifted, and he then took over for a few weeks, and not only checked the grammar, was proofreading, and then after, I would say, at the end of October, we had the final version. Also, some of my friends, former refugees from communist Czechoslovakia, they had some comments. And then between October and end of 2018, I sent this article to all mainstream media, like a Globe and Mail, National Post, Calgary Herald, Calgary Sun, Vancouver Sun, Toronto Sun, Edmonton Sun. I don't know, like it was probably 10 of them did not receive any response. So I had my plan B, and my plan B was, okay, I will publish that. And symbolically, I wanted to publish that on January 1st, 2019, year when we have federal election. And I did. I first published on LinkedIn exactly at noon. And then when I was on my Facebook, I saw actually Spencer Fernando articles. So I decided to try it, and I sent him. And within 2 hours, he published, which I'm very thankful for.
Wonderful. So I want to talk a little bit about the article, the original article. Because you say, I survived communism. Are you ready for your turn? And you're speaking directly to Canadians here. This is, it was scientifically proven that communism is the only social economic system providing the masses with justice and equality. 100% of scientists agree on this. This topic is not up for debate, so proclaimed my professor during one of his lectures. So let's talk about that today, because science, this whole pandemic, it's all about the scientists say, the climate change, it's all about these scientists say. And I love, they got smart. Nobody ever agrees 100% on anything. So, in Canada, it's not 100%, it's 97%.
Well, our communists, they've been much better. 100, okay? Not 97, 100. And I still remember when that I heard from our professor, first year university. We had mandatory political seminars, meaning that if you would not attend those seminars, which they've been around once per month, you can be literally, excluded, or you cannot continue in education. So your marks from math, physics, No, that was not exactly important. Attendance in political seminars, and they always they watched us. So this is what he said, and you know, when I heard that for the first time regarding climate change, and my husband is scientist, you know, when I told him, listen, we had scientific communism, that was subject, mandatory subject, and this is what we've been taught. So first he laughed for half hour what that means, scientific communism, and I said this is what it is. So we talk about that, and we realized that communist dictators, they always use science to confirm their propaganda. And the reason is because many people, they don't realize that science is not about consensus, ideologies. Science always has to be challenged. Otherwise, it's not science. So I think people, they feel scientists as some form of authority, and they don't question them. So, you know, that means that those who wanted to confirm propaganda with public, they use the word science.
So they're using, you know, the terminology of science and scientists to back up their claims. But in essence, I mean, like anything, I mean, I always tell people follow the money. Who paid for it?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Because whoever paid for it, if I'm the one who's receiving a research grant, for example, on the science, you know, typically people are going to pay to get the result that they're looking for. So I have a saying from, you know, being in the aerospace and defense back, you know, a number of years, that follow the money. Follow the money, because if you follow the money, you'll find out the agenda behind, you know, what it is that they're trying to accomplish.
Well, if I can add something, what I'm concentrating on to recognize when it's about science and when it's about propaganda, the moment when you can see that they wanted to achieve consensus, you know, then you know that you are talking about propaganda. Real science is always questioned, you know, it's skeptical.
Well, it's debated. It's peer-reviewed, right?
Exactly.
It's challenged. But the left today, heaven forbid, you challenge the science, the data, because they run away. They just call you a racist, or they try to do character assassination, which I know you want to talk about. And they do that intentionally because they can't debate the science, because it's not science. It is an ideology.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Exactly. And I love this. 100% scientists agree.
They've been better. Not 97. That's
4
not
out of
enough.
4 out of 5 dentists, 4 out of 5 doctors. You know, how many times do we see that today? On you know, materials and things that we buy, and you know. Okay, so you know, I was reminded of the blustery pronouncement the first time I encountered this spurious claim, you say, and a consensus of 97% of scientists agree to global warming is man-made. Most people don't question scientific statements because they think they are facts. And so we've just kind of talked a little bit about that. Science doesn't require consensus. As a matter of fact, it usually requires debate. And that seems to be silenced today more and more in our society. But here you talk about the former Czech president, you know, and it says, it becomes evident that while discussing climate, we are not witnessing a clash of views about the environment, but a clash of views about human freedom. Environmentalism is the biggest threat to freedom, democracy, the market economy, and prosperity, he says. And he wrote a book. But I'm going to say that environmentalism has taken the sideline because I don't think they got the result that they wanted, or the expediency. But now I think that's been replaced with COVID.
Correct.
COVID, and Mr. Trudeau has already, in his video, talked about the Great Reset and how COVID has presented itself as the perfect opportunity to move forward efficiently with their pre-pandemic plans.
Absolutely. Well, I will just touch a little bit. We are in psychological war. That we are in war per se, and the main aspect is psychological war. And you know, once they realize that they cannot scare enough people through climate change, They had to introduce something else. And I think this was just put together last maybe 12 to 18 months, literally. And that's how they came with COVID. I'm not saying virus doesn't exist. It does. But there is absolutely no pandemic. And lots of research. It's again supporting that. But what is main goal of both climate change and COVID is to completely crash Western economy, make people, specifically small businesses, depend on government, and then to introduce a great reset. We know very well that great reset is basically the final stage, which is communism.
Yeah, it's the Klaus Schwab, you will own nothing and be happy.
Yeah.
You know what? Free society owns no property.
Exactly. So it's basically nationalization and wealth redistribution. So that is their ultimate goal. And this way they can completely control people.
And you talk about in your article too, because you say the rich, people wealthy, people who have money, and I don't think the ultra rich, because I think they're the ones that are in on this. They're the ones that will they will own all the property. They'll be the ones in control.
Yeah.
But I think really it's, in any communist society, you see them attack the small business owner.
Yeah.
You know, the independent-minded individual who's taken everything they have, and we're seeing it here right now in Alberta. And they're forcing their doors closed. So these people now are forced to rely on the government for their very survival.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your experience in Czechoslovakia, because that, I think you've written some information in here where you saw exactly that happen.
Well, what basically happened in Czechoslovakia now, I would like to explore a little bit this KGB methods, okay, which they have these 3 stages. And the first one is polarization, the second one is demoralization, and the last one is revolution. And these 3 stages, they've been used in between 1940 or 40 to 50 and establish a communism power. And they are happening now also, not only in Canada, but basically everywhere on this globe. So experience, the first one is definitely polarization, divide and conquer. Okay, that is really big, and that what I realized first time in 2015. You have to use some trigger words. What those words they will trigger? They will trigger 2 emotions. The first one is injustice. The second one is fear for survival. And injustice is connected with victimhood. You have to make people to feel victimized by somebody. Now, communist Czechoslovakia, they concentrate on people to basically to make them feel victimized by private owners. Okay?
Employers.
Yes, employers. So they turn employees against employers. They specifically they concentrated on small business because it's harder to control small business. When communism failed, for example, China, they learned a lot. So for example, they loved private business, but only big entities because it's easier to control them.
Well, it's the great stakeholder that Klaus Schwab has talked about with the World Economic Forum. That
exactly.
It will be stakeholders. It will be big business and government.
Yes, and this is exactly what has China. So they are definitely getting smarter. But that was, for example, in 50s to turn employees against employers. How do they do that? What kind of trigger word they use? Number 1, they will not call people who are, let's say, small private owners, they like successful or wealthy, and that's what I heard 23 years ago when I moved to Canada. Now they are rich.
Oh, Justin Trudeau has made it very clear that small business owners are crooks and tax cheats.
Exactly. So demonize them.
Yes.
Demonize them at all costs. Another word which they use, and this is what I heard, for example, from former Alberta government, NDP government, is profit. Profit has to have negative connotation. So I'm exploiting you for my profit. That's how they started to stage private business, specifically small private business. So, and as I said, the main reason is because they cannot control those people. Well, if is somebody financially independent, government cannot control them. That's a very big thing. Now, the extreme left these days, they are much smarter, and they use additional tools, and they are trying to divide society as much as possible. So
it's the gay society versus,
exactly.
it's the black versus white. It's white privilege. You hear it all the time. It's, we turn around and we single out our indigenous population. We've made them victims or feel like they're victims. And, every possible way that they could, we've done nothing but we've got these collective little groups, and they have very successfully pitted every one of them against the other and created problems where none existed. Frank DeCotter really spoke of this in his book as well. In China, where people lived alongside each other peacefully, never had an issue, and then the government came in and riled all these divisions, made people feel like they were victimized and pitted people against each other. In Manitoba, we have a snitch line.
Yeah, not only in Manitoba. Yeah.
Right? So we are told here, this Christmas, tell on your neighbors, call.
Exactly.
And I'm going, these are things for me that, just even a year and a half ago, I knew we were on a bad path, but I never thought ever in my lifetime that we would have neighbors calling on neighbors, that we would be locked in our homes. This is prison. Right? Yeah. But except it's better because they don't have to pay for the meals. They don't have to pay for the rent or the heat. Right? So they've successfully locked us in our homes without any expense or inconvenience even to them.
Absolutely. And again, making people dependent on government.
Yeah.
Crush their businesses and financially to make them dependent on the government. Big time, you're absolutely right. So they engage in many different forms of how to polarize society. So this is a big part. What I didn't mention in my article, that besides science, they use also media, and this is big part of that. Media, they played a big role in communist Czechoslovakia. We heard from any radio, TV, books, whatever, the same. It was the same propaganda. And the purpose is, again, to create a motion of that because everybody is speaking the same. That must be true.
Well, even Chrystia Freeland had said, repeat a lie enough times and people believe it to be true.
Exactly, Goebbels' concept. So in communism media, they played a really big role, and at the time we didn't have social media. So what I see now, actually I have to say that even I grew up in communist regime and I could see censorship. What is happening now, I didn't see before. Like, this is absolutely disgusting. So even social media are now censoring everything. We went so far that if you wanted to know what is true, just post that on social media, and if they will block that, that means this is true. That's how we are. And I wanted to touch something very important. What media also they were doing. They concentrate on, if they found anybody who was brave enough to be opponent, they concentrate on assassination of character of this person. So I remember, for example, people who escaped from communism. Some people, they probably know names like Navratilova or Ivan Lendl, they escaped. They've been in every media described as traitors, public enemies, and just paint black, black, black. So
the truth becomes enemy number one in a communist society, right?
Exactly. So pay attention to media, and especially mainstream media, which are highly compromised, and they are not journalists anymore. They are activists, and I would say they are concentrated on propaganda.
So CBC, who receives $1 billion, and has what's the viewership? 4% of Canadians.
4%, yes.
You mean they're not journalists? I agree. I think they're called state propaganda.
They are absolutely state propaganda. Yeah, they're just reminding me what I call the Russians. They had Komsomolnaya Pravda, and Pravda means true, and there was anything but true. So it's the same with CBC, and CBC is not only one. Yeah, but it's probably the biggest one. So pay attention. Who is, literally chased by mainstream media? Which person they hate the most? That means they wanted to
that's Donald Trump.
That means exactly they wanted to silence that person. They wanted to scare any supporters, and there is reason behind that, and not small one. Because maybe that person is keeping you away, literally, from totalitarian enslavement.
Well, it's interesting because Chinese and Russia and communism, they use a lot of very nice slogans and words. Of course. And like even some of the campaigns, I know in China, the 100 flowers. It sounds so beautiful. And so tell us a little, because you talk in here very, they use these beautiful words, and then, but it is what the opposite of what they say is actually the opposite is the truth, right? So, but you wanted to bring up a reference to abusive relationships, for example. Mm-hmm. Nobody comes out and says, marry me so I can beat you, abuse you, and then take it, It never starts that way. It never happens that way.
So how it's starting? You see, that this is, lots of people, they don't realize that they are under indoctrination and they are slowly brainwashed. So thank you for this question. This is quite important. And when I show them that this actually has some, correlation with abusive relationship, they can relate. So how abusive relationship is working? So the first stage, always abuser is nice. It's nice to future victim. Okay, so exactly, they don't scream, they don't use physical violence, nothing like that. Once there is emotional bond created, they can move to another stage. What they are also doing during first stage, they are trying to tell to victim that he or she is victimized by their friends and family. Why? Because they wanted to isolate them from friends and family. Why they wanted to isolate them from friends and family? So they don't have the different perspective, only their perspective. And this is what our media are doing. They don't want you to know something else, only one perspective. So isolate you from truth. That is very important. Now, how to recognize that this person is a really nice person, and I'm saying niceness doesn't mean goodness, okay? That's two different things. And many times when somebody is nice, I'm asking what is behind that, and if it's their manipulation or something else. But how to recognize that? So the moment when you started to question their activities and attention, watch how they react. Are they listening? Do they want to speak? Do they want to debate? Or they started to call you names? They started to do some emotional abuse or even physical abuse. So if they don't listen, if they shut you down, they even physically restrain you, then you are in an abusive relationship. What is goal of abusive relationship? Eventually isolate you and stop any income coming your way. So that means you will lose your financial freedom. Once you are losing financial freedom, you are under their control completely.
Of course. I mean, how do you pay your bills? How do you
Exactly.
how do you feed your children? You know, people, this is the deception and the manipulation that really tends to anger me, is that even thinking about even like vaccinations right now, you know, in Ontario, for example, they're talking about cards in order to travel, in order to do this. They can deny you services. They won't force you to take a vaccine, but will just deny you certain services, certain freedoms that you're totally accustomed to. And I'm sitting there going, you know, how, this is the problem, it's the boil the frog.